A woman paid 2 men to kidnap her. Not to threaten her. Not to scare her. Kidnap her. Not out of desperation. Not out of madness. She chose them deliberately. She briefed them in person. She paid the deposit herself. In cash. From a bag she had been filling. For 7 months. And on the night it happened. She walked toward the van. Without hesitating. No fear. No second thoughts. No regret. She had planned this for 18 months. She had thought of everything. Everything except one thing. The man she was trying to steal from. Her husband. Had found out 4 months earlier. He hadn't called the police. He'd called the same men. And by the time Diana Harlow climbed into the back of that van, she was no longer running the operation. She was the target. 8:54 p.m. The underground parking garage beneath the Grand Meridian Hotel was nearly empty. Diana crossed the concrete floor without hesitation. Heels clicking on the ground. Each step deliberate. Each step chosen. Why would she be nervous? This was her plan. These were her men. This was her night. The black panel van sat near the far wall. Exactly where she had told them to be. Marcus Webb was behind the wheel. Former military. Professional. The kind of man who treated illegal work like a business transaction. Nothing personal. Just a service. Diana had spent 3 months finding him. She trusted him. As much as anyone in her position could trust anyone. The side door slid open. She climbed inside. And immediately, something felt wrong. There was another man. Large. Broad-shouldered. Completely motionless. Watching her. She had never seen him before. Marcus noticed her confusion. But he didn't explain. Didn't introduce them. Didn't say a word. That was unusual. Marcus always explained things. The stranger finally spoke. One word. Priest. No last name. No explanation. Just priest. Then silence. The door slammed shut. The hood went over Diana's head. The restraints tightened around her wrists. Hard. Far harder than they were supposed to. She almost laughed. Nervous habit. Those are too tight, Marcus. No answer. The van started moving. Diana did what she always did. When she didn't have information. She gathered it. Counted turns. Tracked time. Measured distance. The route mattered. Because she knew exactly where the safe house was supposed to be. 22 minutes. South side of the city. An abandoned rental property. Everything arranged months earlier. The van drove 22 minutes. Then 30. Then 40. Then 50. And it kept going. In the dark of that van. With her wrists bound. And the city disappearing behind her. Diana Harlow had a lot of time to think. She thought about 11 years earlier. A Sunday morning. Brunch. Champagne. A man who knew exactly how to make a woman feel like the most important person in the room. A document placed in front of her. A prenup. Grant told her it was a formality. Something his accountants required. Nothing to worry about. She had believed him. She signed it. Barely read it. Years later. When she finally did read it. When she finally sat across from a lawyer. And asked what it actually meant. The answer was this. If Diana left Grant Harlow. She would walk away with $200,000. That was it. Not a share of the businesses. Not a fraction of the properties. Not a percentage of the $80 million fortune she had watched him build. Across 11 years of her life. $200,000. She saw another lawyer. Then another. Then one more after that. The answer never changed. The agreement was airtight. There was no legal way out. So she started looking for a different kind. That search had eventually led her to Marcus Webb. To burner phones. To secret meetings. To a plan that was either genius or catastrophic. And at the time, she had been certain it was genius. $2 million in ransom. New identity. New country. New life. 18 months of preparation. All of it leading to this moment. This van. This wrong direction. For months before that night, Grant Harlow discovered everything. Not because Diana made a mistake. Because Grant had already started preparing his own exit from the marriage. And he'd hired a private investigator to build his case. He wanted leverage. Documentation. The kind of material that wins a divorce proceeding before it starts. What the investigator found instead was something Grant had not expected. Burner phones. Cash withdrawals in irregular amounts. Encrypted messages on a device. Registered to a holding company. That traced, with some effort, to a man named Marcus Webb. The report landed on Grant's desk. On a rainy Thursday afternoon. He read every page. Then read them again. Most men would have been furious. Most men would have been shocked. Most men would have called their attorney. And had Diana arrested before dinner. Grant Harlow was not most men. Grant didn't respond to betrayal with rage. He responded with arithmetic. Diana was going to cost him money. That meant Diana was going to cost something else instead. He closed the report. Set it in his desk drawer. Poured himself a scotch. And he started making his own arrangements. Before we go any further. If you've never seen a story where both sides of a con are running simultaneously, you're about to subscribe right now so you don't miss what this channel covers next. And stay with me. Because what Grant does in the next 3 minutes is the thing that turns this from a crime story into something much darker. 3 days after reading the report, Grant made a phone call. Not to the police. Not to his attorney. To a man named Cole. A name buried deep inside the investigators' findings. A man connected to Marcus Webb. A man connected to the operation. Grant arranged a private meeting. Then he arrived with money. A lot of money. The conversation lasted less than half an hour. By the time it ended, the kidnapping had changed hands. Grant's offer was simple. Don't help her escape. Help her disappear. Cole thought about it. Then he accepted. From that moment forward, the operation Diana had spent 18 months building from the ground up. Every detail, every contact, every dollar belonged to Grant. Priest entered the picture shortly after. A man outside Diana's network. Outside her knowledge. Brought in specifically because he had no loyalty to her. No awareness of the original arrangement. And no hesitation about what Grant had asked him to do. Diana's version of this night was theft. Grant's version was something with no clean word for it. At this exact moment in the story, who do you think is actually in control? Diana? Marcus? Grant? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Because in about 3 minutes, you're going to find out. That the person who ultimately decides how this night ends isn't Diana. And it isn't Grant. It's the one person in this story nobody has mentioned yet. The hood came off. Diana blinked against harsh overhead lights. Concrete floors. Steel beams. Broken windows near the ceiling. Letting in nothing but cold air. A warehouse. Unknown location. No landmarks. No sounds from outside. That told her anything useful. Marcus sat nearby. Priest stood near the door. Watching. Waiting. Hours passed. Nobody explained anything. Nobody discussed the ransom. Nobody gave her a timeline. And that silence frightened Diana more than threats ever could. Because she understood criminal operations. She had spent 18 months studying exactly how they worked. In a ransom operation, you talked about money constantly. You established contact with the target family. You set deadlines. You created pressure. You needed communication to collect. None of that was happening. But it was something else that made Diana's chest tighten. She noticed it slowly. The kind of detail you almost miss. Because your mind is too busy processing everything else. There were no phones in this room. Not left out carelessly. Not placed on a surface. Not visible in anyone's pocket. Or on the edge of the table nearby. Fully absent. As if someone had known in advance that phones would need to be kept away from whoever was being held here. That was not how a ransom worked. In a ransom operation, you needed phones. You needed them constantly. There was no negotiation planned for this room. Then Priest stood. Walked to the heavy metal door. And left. The door slammed behind him. For the first time all night, Diana was alone with Marcus. She said nothing for a moment. Just listened to the silence. Measured it. Let her breathing slow. What happened? Marcus didn't answer. Marcus. He finally looked at her. And Diana saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not the controlled wariness of a professional. In a complicated situation. Real fear. The kind that lives behind the eyes of someone who has just realized they are on the wrong side of something they don't fully understand. And in that moment, everything snapped into focus. Grant knew. Grant had known for months. Grant had gotten to them first. And Marcus, the man she had chosen, briefed, trusted, was just as trapped as she was. Diana leaned forward. Not frantically. Not desperately. Quietly. The way you speak to someone. When you need them. To hear every single word. You're not getting paid. Marcus stared at her. Think about it. If Grant is willing to spend millions to make me disappear, what do you think happens to the people who helped him do it? Silence. But she could see it working. Because Marcus had already been thinking the same thing. She kept going. One argument. Then another. One risk laid out precisely. Then the next. One scenario described in full detail. Then another. Not emotion. Not desperation. Logic. Because logic had gotten Diana this far. And it was the only thing that might get her out. She spoke for 20 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, Marcus stood. Walked behind her. The sound of a blade. The zip ties hit the floor. He reached into his pocket. Pulled out a phone. Held it out. Make the call. You're at the exact moment where everything turns. If someone sent you this video, now you know why. Share it with someone who needs to see this ending. Because what Diana does in the next 4 minutes takes everything Grant planned and hands it back to her piece by piece. Diana's hands were trembling. She would admit that later. In testimony. Under oath. For the first time in 18 months of meticulous, disciplined preparation. Her hands actually trembled. She dialed. Not Grant. Not her lawyers. Federal authorities. Then she talked. For 12 uninterrupted minutes. Names. Accounts. Dates. Meeting locations. Payment amounts. Phone numbers. Every encrypted conversation. She had spent 18 months protecting. All of it. Gone. Because survival. In that warehouse. In that moment. Had become more important. Than $2 million. Federal prosecutors would later describe that phone call in court as remarkably coherent for someone who had been held against their will for several hours. Remarkably coherent. As if composure, for Diana Harlow, was simply her natural state. The response was immediate. Vehicles started moving. Phones started being tracked. Locations started being monitored. The machine had started. And once it started, it moved fast. Just after 2 a.m., federal agents converged on the warehouse. From 3 directions. Priest was arrested before he reached the exit. Cole was picked up 40 minutes later. At a motel 6 miles east. One arrest led to another. One confession led to another. One name led to the next. Until every road. Every transaction. Every phone call. Every redirected payment. Led back to Grant Harlow. At 2:47 a.m. Grant sat alone in his study. Crystal glass in hand. Firelight. The silence of a man. Waiting for confirmation. Of something he believed was already done. His front door opened. Not a knock. Commands. Footsteps on marble. Flashlight beams cutting through the dark hallway. The glass slipped from his hand. Shattered across the floor. And for the first time, in a very long time, Grant Harlow looked genuinely surprised. The trial lasted 4 months. Grant Harlow spent those 4 months in what courtroom observers described as eerie composure. The same composure that had run his businesses. The same composure that had managed his marriage. The same composure that had let him sit in that chair. Read a report about his wife planning to steal from him. And respond not with anger, but with a counter-operation. That composure did not help him. In a federal courtroom. The evidence was too clean. The cooperating witnesses too many. The recorded calls too specific. The financial trail too clear. And Diana. The woman Grant had spent 11 years underestimating. Sat in that courtroom. Every single day. Composed. Present. Watching. Guilty. 22 years. And then. The final thing. The thing Grant had trusted. More than people. More than loyalty. More than the marriage itself. The prenup. His attorneys argued it was untouchable. The document was explicit. Diana had signed it. It was legally binding. She would leave with next to nothing. The court had a different position. When you use a legal document as a trap, and then use criminal means against the person, the document was designed to contain. The document does not survive the verdict. The prenuptial agreement that had held Diana in place for 11 years. The single sheet of paper she had signed on a Sunday morning over champagne, because a man told her it was just a formality, was voided. Piece by piece. Clause by clause. Diana Harlow walked out of that courtroom with $31 million. Legally. Finally. Hers. One suitcase. One boarding pass. One future. Several months later, a reporter spotted Diana Harlow at an airport. One suitcase. One boarding pass. One future. No husband. No lawyers. No security detail. Just Diana. The reporter called out. Asked the obvious question. Do you regret any of it? Diana stopped. Turned. She considered it. Not for a soundbite. Not for a headline. Actually considered it. With the same patient, measuring stillness. That had defined her for 11 years. In a marriage that wanted her smaller than she was. Then she turned away. Faced the gate. And walked through. Without a word. Maybe that was the answer. Because in the end, the woman who planned her own kidnapping got exactly what she wanted. A new life. She just had to survive her husband first. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know this isn't the kind of content that gets made very often. Subscribe right now if you want more. And tell me in the comments. At what exact moment did you know something was wrong? Was it Priest? Was it the van going the wrong direction? Or did Grant's smile give it away earlier? Turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.